Hi, my name is John Platero, and I'm the CEO of the National Council for Certified Personal Trainers. I'm here to talk to you about stiff-legged deadlifts. Now, this is a pretty popular exercise to work the hip extensors. However, it's really impossible to perform this exercise without affecting a bunch of other muscles, predominantly the spinal erectors. So let's look at this exercise. The knee should not change position. They shouldn't flex or extend. The motion is from the hip only. Remember, if a joint is moving, something is moving it. If you're targeting the posterior part of the body, we need to keep the knees static for this exercise. Exhale on the way down and inhale on the way up. The back should never round and the cervical spine should stay in neutral. There's nothing to see in the mirror. Everything is happening behind you. Any weight in your hands affects your neck. That's where the nerves come from. Also consider this. The further you bend, the load starts to become more of a shearing load than a compressive load to the cervical spine. Looks fairly easy, but in my experience, some people have a hard time keeping both their spine and their knee statics while the hip moves. Let's break it down a little. In terms of sagittal plane motion, the further the feet are apart, the less the hamstrings have to change length. You've just gotten closer to the floor. Now, a wider stance might affect the adductors more, so for this exercise, the closer the feet are together, the greater change in the length in the hamstrings and glutes, which means more cross bridging. We know for sure this works the spinal erectors, the glutes, and the hamstrings, but I've heard some people say it also works the calves at the knee. Huh? Well, I can see how they might think that, and to a certain extent, it just might. The calves cross the knee as well as can flex the knee. However, this seems to be dependent on the knee joint angles. Although you might think the gastroc would be more efficient at flexing the knee at 90 degrees because of the direction of pull, it seems that that's not the case. It seems the gastroc's role starts to diminish in knee flexion at 165 degrees of flexion due to muscle length tension. This is what is referred to as active insufficiency. What was that? Active insufficiency. More about that in a minute. Now here's a study on the screen on the gastroc and knee flexion you can refer to, and here's also a cool video to watch to see that in action. You might have watched this video and thought, yeah, the gastroc is flexing the knee. But remember, it's also going to depend on the direction of the load. Many people get exercises or the muscles they think they're targeting wrong because they don't look at the direction of the weight or load. In a stiff-legged deadlift, since the load is pulling the user into knee flexion, I'm pretty sure the gastroc is not a prime mover at the knee. Most likely, it's working more at the ankle and plantar flexion eccentrically. I've seen some people, and I myself used to think more is better. Well, I was wrong. I even used to have people stand on a step to go past the ground. As you can see, in order for him to get past the ground, he's got to round his back. Geez, what was I thinking? I guess you don't know what you don't know. And in my defense, it was about 25 years ago, and I was only 5 years old. So let's get back to the concept of active insufficiency that I mentioned before, because it's going to be important when looking at a stiff-legged deadlift. Muscles move joints by changing length. The actin and myosin proteins create cross bridges, and when stimulated, shorten. When a muscle is stretched, the actin and myosin actually have more space in the sarcomere to create their cross bridges. Remember, Muscles are made up of a series of sarcomeres. If the muscle is stretched too far, then so are the sarcomeres and the muscle becomes insufficient. The same thing happens when the muscle is shortened too much. Now here's a cool video to see what I'm talking about. When a person flexes the hip too far in a stiff-legged deadlift, this is exactly what can happen. Once the person reaches 2/3 of spinal flexion, the erectors become electrically silent. Yikes! That's what we call exercising on a naked spine. So now that you understand the concept of active insufficiency, you can see why the distance the bar travels should not be judged by how far is from the floor, but instead how far the exerciser can flex at the hip while keeping the back in spinal alignment. Now this is going to be dependent on two major things: dorsal length and flexibility. For example, imagine if someone had only a 12-inch torso. Now I'm exaggerating so you can get the point, but when that person is at 90 degrees of hip flexion at the moment arm, the bar is only 10 inches away from the hip. However, if a person has a 36-inch torso, then the moment arm at 90 degrees will be 3 times further from the hip, hence much harder. Now one last thing, I've heard certain people and even publications refer to this exercise as a straight-legged deadlift. When the leg is straight or the knee is locked, the entire load is now creating a compressive load to the knee joint, and since the leg is straight, the muscles really don't need to be on or activated to support the load. By slightly bending the knee, the muscles engage and support the knee joint. The trick is to keep the knees static and not flex or extend them. Same thing with the spine. I hope this helps. Remember to watch both the spine and the knees. They should both stay in the same place as the user flexors from the hip. So I hope that helps. Stay fit.